Welcome to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. This is your source for market intelligence, forecasts, and success strategies. Well, today we have a great show for you. We're going to talk about advanced 1031 exchange strategies. Now, first we're going to talk about some of the basics of 1031s, but then stay with us. We're going to get into some more advanced strategies. My guest is Ricky Novak. He's CEO of Strategic 1031 Exchange Advisors here joining us in Studio One. Ricky, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here as always.
Well, Ricky, let's first start with some of the basics on the timelines for a delayed 1031 exchange.
Sure. Just as a reminder, 1031 works for any kind of like-kind property, and when you look at the timing, the taxpayer has 45 days from the day they sell the relinquished property. So let's talk in 1031 exchange terminology, right? The property you're selling is your relinquished property.
Right.
So 45 days to identify potential replacement property, and then a total of 180 days to actually close on that replacement property.
Okay, and you talked about like kind. Let's explain that, because I think some people are confused and they're selling an apartment complex and they may not realize they can go into single tenant net lease properties, right? That's like kind. It's investment for investment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions. Like kind really is focused on as long as it's used as an investment or used within a trade or business. When you look at real property, which that's what real estate is, there's a very broad definition. So an apartment complex is like kind to a retail shopping center, is like kind to a warehouse building, is like kind to an office building. So there's a lot of flexibility built into what like kind actually means.
Yeah, and it can be great. So even if you were holding land that was held for investment purposes, you could sell that, maybe that has no income, and move that money into an investment property that's shooting off a bunch of income, and it's still like kind if it was held for an investment, right?
Absolutely. You can move from property that's not producing cash flow to property that is. You can diversify, meaning you can sell one larger asset and maybe diversify into several smaller, or do the reverse, right? Consolidate, take a bunch of smaller assets, sell them at one time, and exchange into one larger income producing property.
Right. And let's talk about something that concerns a lot of people when they have a large amount of money and they're giving that to an intermediary to hold until they find their replacement property. How should you go about choosing your intermediary?
Sure. So the IRS requires a qualified intermediary to serve in that role, kind of like a third-party facilitator, if you will, of the transaction. So the key is you're handing potentially millions of dollars to this qualified intermediary that maybe you don't really know much about. So how do you know your money's safe? Yeah. There's a couple of things you may want to do. Certainly you can ask for references, find out what other well-known, respectable advisory firms work with them, right? Find out which real estate brokers work with them, law firms, accounting firms, etc. Also, you want to understand what they're doing with your money while they hold it. Currently, under the laws as they sit, there really is very limited protection in place for taxpayers. There's no current oversight of the industry. So you really want to look at what is this intermediary doing, and are they tying their own hands? Are they using qualified escrows, qualified trusts, dual authorization bank accounts, keeping the funds liquid, things of that nature?
So an intermediary right now could put your money in a risky investment?
That's what you have to be careful of. During the last recession, you had people that, the intermediary, because there really is limited oversight and regulation, you had intermediaries that were taking money and they were going and buying real estate on their own with it, or putting it in very illiquid investments. So you really want to understand and read. Here's something all real estate people understand. Read the contract, understand what you're agreeing to and what that intermediary might be doing with your money.
Good advice. Let's talk about the ID process on a delayed exchange. You said you have normally 45 days and then 180 days to close on the replacement property.
Correct.
What if you hit the end of a tax year or a tax reporting?
That's an important point, Michael. It's the earlier to occur of your tax reporting deadline or the 180th day. So if you look at the calendar and realize that your next tax reporting deadline falls 40 days before the 180-day deadline, you're going to want to file an extension for your tax return. Otherwise, you have to have the exchange completed at the time that you meet that filing requirement.
Okay. And then how many properties can someone choose to identify?
Sure. So the rules allow up to 3 properties of any value whatsoever. And so if you sell a property or relinquish property for $1 million, you can go out and identify 3 $1 million Dollar General stores, right? And so each one's $1 million. As long as you close on one, you'll meet your exchange requirement.
Okay.
If you identify more than 3, which you are allowed to do, you then have to pay attention to value. What the IRS is trying to protect against is the taxpayer just throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and trying to see what sticks.
Right.
They want to know that you have a legitimate plan and a legitimate intent to complete
And
the exchange.
brokers appreciate that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right? You want to know that the person's serious.
Yeah.
So if you identify more than 3, you have to make sure that the aggregate value, and by value I would argue the actual listed price,
Right.
the aggregate value of what you identify does not exceed by more than twice the sales price of your relinquished property.
Okay.
So it's called the 200% rule.
Okay. All right. Very good. And what if, so you need to spend all of your boot, all your cash you got out of the property you sold, you have to spend all that to completely defer taxes, right? And then what about the debt that you had on the property you sold?
All right, so we're going to keep the math limited so that nobody turns the show off right here in the
Thank
early
you.
part of it. But 2 rules of math to keep in mind. 1, you want your target replacement property, whether you buy 1 or you buy 2 or you buy 5. You want your target replacement property value to equal or exceed the sales price of your relinquished property. So that's the first kind of math equation to keep in mind. The second is the interplay between debt and equity in the transaction. And what you want to remember is you want all of the net cash to roll forward into your replacement property, and then the debt you were relieved of, you want to replace that with either new debt, new cash, or any combination of the 2. So what the IRS is trying to protect against is they don't want you to do a cash out, right? They don't want you to pull all of your equity out of the deal.
Okay. All right. Well, that's clear. What if a taxpayer is sold their relinquished property and they in their 45-day ID period, and they don't identify a property, but they've already put the money with an intermediary? What is the proper process there?
Sure. So you have an interplay between the IRS rules and the Treasury regulations. And what the Treasury regulations say is that during that 45-day period, you can't change your mind. So if you decide 30 days in that you cannot find any targeted replacement property, then the money has to stay with the intermediary until that 45-day ID period runs. And so on day 46, if you've not identified anything and you've not closed on anything, then you can go to the intermediary and say, I want to pull the plug. It's now day 46. Please give me my money back.
Okay. And what if you do identify a property in the 45 days and then you decide not to close on it?
So that's probably the most challenging fact pattern, because we have a lot of clients that call us and say, gosh, I identified 3 properties, 2 have title issues, and the 3rd, somebody else grabbed it before I could. I'm not going to do the exchange. Can I get my money back now? And the Treasury rules, the Treasury regulations say that if you identify property, then you cannot pull the funds back out until the earlier of the completion of the exchange, meaning you actually close on 1 or more of those properties, or the 181st day. So unless there's a natural disaster or something else that occurs where the IRS comes out with a get out of jail free card, those funds have to sit with the intermediary for the duration of the exchange.
And those are some important facts. And if you're dealing with an intermediary who would let you identify a property, not close, and give you your money before 180 days, you better watch out, because you might not have the right intermediary, right?
That could be a major problem. There's actually an instance where an intermediary was accommodating all of his clients and doing whatever they asked. The IRS actually came in and invalidated all of the exchanges.
Watch out. Well, stay with us next. We're going to explore some advanced 1031 exchanges, so stay with us. I'm Michael Bull. This is America's Commercial Real Estate Show. Hey there, thanks for checking out the Commercial Real Estate Show. Don't miss a video of special interest to you. Be sure to subscribe below. And if you appreciate the videos, be sure and thank our sponsors. There's a link to more information about them in the description. For more videos, podcasts, and articles, check out CREshow.com.